In a world of evil, those who hurt the ones closest to them are the real monsters. A world where a mother's actions led to the ultimate demise of a loved one.
Our top story this morning, a 2-year-old girl is missing and detectives say her mother has provided them with more lies than information.
Caylee Anthony's lies are consistent, landing her behind bars and giving rise to the greatest social media trial of the century.
I admitted that I lied to law enforcement. So I am a convicted liar. It's the truth.
Caylee became a prime suspect for the murder of her daughter. Even her mother was confused.
Maybe she's confused, maybe she's sick, maybe something's happened that she doesn't know.
Caylee's manipulation dragged her father into the center of attention to the point where he nearly committed suicide.
You traveled to a hotel in Daytona Beach for the purposes of taking your own life.
Yes, sir.
You might wonder, how exactly did we end up here? What's the real reason behind Caylee's daughter's disappearance? How did she bend the law? The craziness she's up to today and much more. When Caylee was 19, her family was baffled to notice a disturbing incident. She had started gaining weight, and her parents thought she might be pregnant. But Caylee denied it and even claimed she was still a virgin. It wasn't until months later that she finally admitted the truth, even then no one really knew who the father was. On August 9th, 2005, she gave birth to a little girl named Caylee Anthony. Most of us are familiar, at least a little bit, with Caylee and her story. Caylee Anthony was born on March 19, 1986 in Warren, Ohio. She was one of 2 kids raised by Cindy and George Anthony. From the outside, they looked like your average American family. Caylee was bright, fun, and had friends who saw her as a typical teenager. In June 2008, things got tense. After a big fight with her mom, Cindy, who had started doubting if Caylee was a good mom, Caylee packed up and left with Caylee. In the following weeks, Cindy kept calling her daughter, asking to see Caylee. But every time, Caylee had the same excuse. Caylee was with her babysitter, someone named Zenaida Zanny Fernandez Gonzalez. Then, after 31 long days without seeing her granddaughter, Cindy finally called the police on July 15, 2008, after tracking her daughter to where she was staying.
Can you tell me where the closest one I can come into?
What are you trying to accomplish by bringing them to the station?
I have a 22-year-old person that has...
The first call to the police happened when Cindy discovered that Caylee had been claiming Caylee was with a babysitter named Zanny. According to what Caylee told her mother, the baby was fine and still with this Zanny woman. At first, Cindy wasn't panicking. She still believed Caylee was safe, just with someone they could easily retrieve her from. So she calmly called the police, hoping they could bring her granddaughter home safely and report the car theft that occurred when Caylee left the house after their fight.
By bringing them to the station.
I have a 22-year-old person that has grand theft sitting in my auto with me.
So the 22-year-old person stole something?
Yes.
Is this a relative?
Yes.
Okay, is this your son?
Daughter. My car was stolen. We've retrieved it today. We found out where it was at, and I've got affidavit to my banking account. I want to bring her in.
Okay.
After the big fight with her mom, Caylee stormed out of the house and took her mom's car without asking. Caylee later claimed that she went to drop Caylee off at Zanny's place and then head to her boyfriend's place. But things didn't go as planned. The car started acting up and was running low on gas. Instead of fixing it or calling for help, Caylee simply parked it at a nearby store and walked away because she didn't want to spend her money on the car. She went straight to her boyfriend's place from there. A few days later, the car was towed, and the impound lot contacted her parents to come and deal with the fine.
That's actually going to be in the jurisdiction of the sheriff's office. Let me transfer you.
Okay, because my next thing will be down to trial thing, and we'll have a court order together. If that's what you want to say, we'll do it. You'll never. Well, then you have one more day. No, I'm not giving you another day. I've given you...
Cindy still did know that something might have gone wrong with Caylee. To her, it just seemed like Caylee was stalling, maybe trying to buy more time to bring the little girl home. But Cindy had had enough. She told Caylee, "You've already had a whole month. I'm not giving you one more day." With that, she drove Caylee back to the family house. And that's when the second 911 call was made.
Hey, what's her name?
Caylee Anthony.
Casey's there right now?
Yes, I got her. I finally found her after a month. She's been missing for a month. I found her, but we can't find my granddaughter.
Is Caylee not telling you where her daughter is?
Correct.
Maybe Cindy felt the first 911 call was taking too long, Maybe she just wanted to be sure someone was actually coming. Or maybe deep down she was afraid Casey might try to sneak out again before the police arrived. With this second call, she was hoping to speed things up. About an hour passed and still no officer had shown up. Cindy, growing more suspicious, kept a close eye on Casey the whole time. That's when something unexpected happened. She overheard Casey talking to her brother, and what Casey said shook her. It was something serious, maybe that hinted at a much darker truth. That's when Cindy made the third 911 call. For the first time, she began to realize just how bad things might really be.
Emergency.
I called a little bit ago. The deputy sheriff saying I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. Her mother finally admitted that she's been missing.
Casey's brother had been pressing her, trying to get the truth out of her. And finally, Casey said it. She claimed that the babysitter, Zanny, had taken Caylee and told her she was never bringing her back. That was the moment it all hit Cindy and the panic set in. A stranger had supposedly taken her granddaughter, and it had already been over a month with no word, no sign, nothing. Cindy realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding or some excuse. Something was seriously wrong.
Now, we're talking about a 3-year-old little girl. I need to find her. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store.
And I said, what the hell do you mean Zanny won't give her back? And she said, Mom, she goes, when I went to pick her up, she said, you can't have her. I said, what are you talking about?
Cindy was finally starting to connect the dots. At first, she had been in denial. She knew Casey wasn't telling the full truth, but she had no idea just how deep the lies went. What triggered this response was that before the towed car was retrieved, Cindy and her husband George went to pick it up. As soon as they opened the car door, they were hit with a smell they'd never forget. To them, it smelled like something had died in there.
I have not seen her since the 7th of June. George, Caylee, listen. Caylee, listen.
Is your daughter there?
Yes.
Can I speak with her?
She's downstairs. They want to talk to you. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit what's going on?
My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
And you last saw her a month ago?
31 days.
Just look at the way Casey sounded during the call. It was strange, almost like she wasn't worried at all about her missing daughter. No panic, no urgency. Just calm, cold responses that didn't match the seriousness of the situation.
Do you have a name?
Her name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez.
Who is that? Babysitter?
She's been my nanny for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years.
And why are you calling now? Why didn't you call 31 days ago?
I've been looking for her and have gone through other resources to try to find her, which was stupid.
Even the 911 operator sounded shocked. She was a woman too, probably a mother herself. And like most of us listening to that call, she just couldn't believe what she was hearing. Casey had casually said that her daughter had been missing for over a month. No emotion, no urgency, just matter of fact. This all happened on July 16th, 2008. And not long after that third panicked 911 call from her mother, an officer finally arrived at the house to speak with Casey.
Also, before I turned on the recorder, I gave you a chance because I wanted to explain what happens if you make a false report or if there's something about this incident that you're not telling us the truth of. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure I made it perfectly clear that, if you want to go ahead and rescind this statement, and if you want to tell me a different story about what happened, mm-hmm. if you're trying to fabricate a story to kind of make something look a little bit better, mm-hmm. now's your time to tell me. Are you telling me that this is the story you want to stick with?
That's the truth. It's the story I'm going to stick with. Yes.
Okay.
Just like the rest of us, the police could tell something wasn't right. So they allowed Casey to repeat what she had said during the 911 call. She told the officer that she had left Caylee with the nanny, a woman she claimed used to work for someone she knew at Universal Studios. She even gave them an address, saying it was where the nanny lived, but then added that she didn't know the exact house number. Things already sounded shady, but Casey kept going. She also said she worked at Universal herself, which, as it turns out, was a total lie. She didn't work there at all, or at least at that moment.
You still work at Universal?
Yes.
What do you do at Universal?
I'm an event coordinator.
Okay. What is Juliet? What position is she? Where is she working?
She's also an event coordinator. We work in the same department.
You have a number for Juliet?
Ooh, offhand, I can't think of one.
Is she in your SIM card?
No, she's not. Some of the more recent numbers, her number just changed because she just moved back up north.
Any rational person listening to Casey's story could tell something just wasn't adding up. She claimed that she had lost her phone, and with it, all her contacts were gone, even though she still had the same SIM card. That meant, according to her, she didn't have the phone number for the babysitter, or her coworkers, or even the man who supposedly introduced her to the nanny.
Is there anything about this story that you're telling me that is untrue? Or is there anything that you want to change or divert from what you've already told me?
No, sir.
Did you cause any injury to your child, Caylee?
No, sir.
Did you hurt Caylee or leave her somewhere and you're worried that if we find that out that people are going to look at you the wrong way?
No, sir.
After the interview at the house, the officers decided the next step was to visit Casey's workplace. Since she claimed to work at Universal Studios but had no contact info for any of her coworkers, they figured they might as go and speak to them in person. So they all headed over there together. When they arrived, Casey started walking them around the building, hallway after hallway, pretending like she knew exactly where she was going. But after going in circles for a while, she finally stopped, turned to the officers, and admitted the truth. What she didn't know was that the officer already knew the truth. They had checked ahead and found out Casey had been fired from Universal back in 2006, 2 years earlier. But instead of calling her out right away, they had played along just to see how far she would take the lie.
You would see what she would do, how she would react. And she's kind of waving at people, but they are waving back. I mean, but they're like, they're waving like, we actually turned down a hallway where there's nowhere to go. It's a dead-end hall. Casey turned and looked at us and said, I don't really work here.
That just shows the kind of character she is. Someone who tells a lie, plays along, and waits it out until it's eventually exposed as deceptive. At this point, the officer had had enough.
The thing that happened, and this is the honest to God's truth of everything that I've said, I do not know where she is. The last person that I saw her with is Zenaida. She's the last person that I've seen my daughter with.
And see, here's the problem. I think Sergeant Allen's trying to get to this, is that we know that's not the truth. We know, listen.
Is.
We know that that's not true. That can't be the truth. Because if that were the truth, everything you would have told us would have been on the money. The addresses you would have taken us would have been on the money. Everything else would have matched. If you had told us the truth, we wouldn't be here at Universal Studios at a place that you've been fired since 2006. With you trying to explain to us, you have an office and all that stuff. We wouldn't be here. So we know, and this is the part we need to get past, we already know that you're not telling us the truth, that you know what happened to Caylee and you know where Caylee is.
The officer was clearly frustrated and couldn't hide it anymore. He told Casey that the lies needed to stop. He even tried to give her a way out again, saying that if something accidental had happened to Caylee, now was the time to tell the truth.
And oh, by the way, I got my mom and dad's car towed. And then when my parents asked me what happened to my daughter, I told them I hadn't seen her in 5 weeks. So they called the police, okay? Now what I did is I lied to the police when they got there, okay? I told them a whole bunch of crap that isn't true, gave them a bunch of bad addresses to go look at where I know that my daughter's not there. And I did all this to try to help find my daughter. Makes sense to you, right? That makes sense to you?
And this is the problem with people like Casey, the kind many call pathological liars. The officer asked her, why lie about working here? What was the point of bringing us all the way here if you knew you didn't work here anymore? But she had no real answer. People like her lie for no clear reason. Sometimes it seems like they lie simply because it's the first thing that comes to mind.
She was comfortable with it, I was comfortable with it.
What about Jeff? You said Jeff worked here until about 2 months ago?
No, he hasn't worked here for quite a while.
10 months? How long?
It's been at least 10 months.
Okay. He got fired in 2002. He hasn't been an employee here since 2002. What about the girl?
Juliet?
Yeah, what about her?
She left 2 months ago. That's exactly what she had told me.
Juliet Lewis never worked at Universal Studios.
Even after being caught, she kept lying. So they decided to lay out this situation clearly for her.
So once again, okay, you never did answer my question. You're reaching and helping find her by bringing us here to this office that you don't have, is helping us find her how? Because what you're doing right now is you're doing everything you can to find your daughter. You have 3 experienced detectives right now whose sole focus is here to help you find your daughter, okay? And we're here because you brought us here, correct?
Absolutely.
You directed us here because we're going to your office to find evidence that will help us find her, okay? Now that we're here, I want you to tell me how that's helping. What is it we're doing here? What's helping us right now, okay? We've come to an office that doesn't exist.
It's not helping.
So why'd you do it?
Honestly, I wanted to come up and try to talk to security. Maybe pass around a picture of Caylee. I legitimately have not seen my daughter in 5 years.
With that, the officers hoped they could finally get some truth out of Casey, and she was asked again where she last saw her daughter.
There's no office, so there's no anything anywhere. We've made that clear already.
Right.
So if I have a copy of it still, it would be on my computer at home. I'm pretty sure I kept that. I don't think that's something I would have gotten rid of.
With Casey clearly refusing to tell the truth, the police figured it was time to talk to someone else, her mother, Cindy. After all, she was the one who had called 911 in the first place. Maybe she'd be more willing to help. Cindy thought Casey had nothing to do with Caylee's disappearance. She just wanted to help find her granddaughter. She probably thought Casey was just being careless or manipulative, not dangerous. But as the case started building up against her daughter, Cindy slowly began to realize how serious things were getting.
It's very obvious right now that they're focusing their concerns on building a case against my daughter. And for whatever reasons, that's fine. They can do whatever they want, but I don't want the investigation stopped into looking for Caylee because I know my daughter did not kill her.
Cindy's tone started to shift. At first, she sounded like a mother who just wanted her daughter to face the truth, to understand that she had handled Caylee's disappearance all wrong. But as things got more serious and the lies and evidence started stacking up, Cindy's focus changed.
It's just very disheartening the way everything is from the judge. It sounds like, nobody on these charges, or not even charged, she's not even charged with anything, should be treated this way. A $500,000 bond on something for 2 misdemeanors and a 3rd-degree felon. She hasn't even been formally charged with anything.
When you say she hasn't been formally charged,
she hasn't been charged with anything.
In relation to what?
Into anything that would constitute a $500,000 bail.
Okay, but we are all of the understanding she has been formally charged with crimes.
No, not as far as the attorney says. She hasn't been formally charged with.
The way it works, she hasn't been formally charged with anything as it relates to the disappearance of Caylee itself.
Despite Cindy's constant push to defend her daughter, insisting that Casey was being treated unfairly by both the police and the court, things were already moving in a different direction. Even though Casey hadn't been charged with anything directly related to Caylee's disappearance just yet, the law wasn't letting her off easy. She was hit with charges like obstruction of justice, interference with a police investigation, and child neglect. The lies, the delays, and the lack of urgency were catching up with Casey. Remember that third 911 call Cindy made? The one where she said that the car smelled like there had been a dead body in it? Now, all of a sudden, the story was changing. When talking to the officers later, Cindy started downplaying what she had said. She gave them a different version, like maybe she hadn't meant it that way, or maybe the smell wasn't what she thought it was.
Is threatening her daughter or one of us. And what I'm going to be telling you may make more sense to that. The more you start thinking. She told me, remember the conversations, Mom? Was not let out. The only person, and I had not spoken to any person regarding Wanda's name, to anybody except Detective Melich when I gave him that. To nobody, because I'm not going to write out any lead or tip or do anything that's going to jeopardize the investigation.
All I was trying to find out was this first-hand knowledge she had, and was there any interaction with him? How did this lead get out there? Because it's strange when all of a sudden somebody's calling you and not the crime line, but you just explained.
Well, she tried. She said she tried for over 2 years.
George, Cindy's husband and a former homicide detective, he admitted that it smelled like a dead body when the trunk of the car was opened. And coming from someone with his background, that meant something. Cindy also admitted that the smell was there, but now she was leaning toward a different explanation. She started suggesting that maybe the odor came from a rotten pizza left in the trunk, not anything more serious. She was trying to soften the truth, possibly to protect her daughter, or maybe because she didn't want to believe what her instincts were already telling her.
Everywhere. And so there's, Orange County, they're doing what they can to, look at these leads. That's why, we're trying to handle the out-of-state leads after the least trying to handle the in-state leads. I mean, and there's a lot of people involved, and I don't think some people understand.
I know I certainly wouldn't involve my kids if on a whim on something of this magnitude. That's my point.
When Cindy was tracking Casey after she noticed something was wrong, she went over to her boyfriend's place, Tony Lazaro. Tony was later interviewed by the police for more details about what happened. Even though Casey was out partying and acting like nothing was wrong, the person closest to her saw a different side. Tony noticed something that stood out. Casey was having constant nightmares. She'd wake up shaken, sometimes in tears. But behind closed doors, something was haunting her. Maybe it was guilt over something she did, or maybe it was fear over something someone else did to Caylee.
Yes. Was waking up in cold sweats during the middle of the night. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. Sorry, it's my father. I'll just ignore that real quick. Yes, she would wake up or wake me up either in the middle of the night, or I would just wake up in the middle of the night and see that she was sweaty in bed, and I would ask her why, and she said that she would have nightmare. She was having a nightmare or something, and then would bring up the nightmare pertaining to our relationship.
And that was after July 5th.
July 5th, yep.
Because you came back from New York July 5th. Yes.
Even though Cindy tried to explain away the smell in the car as rotten pizza, the authorities weren't buying it. They ran their tests on the car. Inside the trunk, they discovered a single strand of hair. It was tested and confirmed to be from someone in the Anthony family. That alone didn't prove everything, but it could have belonged to Caylee. Then came the stain in the trunk. The shape and size of it looked like it could match the outline of a small child's body. As part of the investigation, the police took the family's computer and checked the browser history. On dates after Caylee's disappearance, they found a search for chloroform. The search was linked to the same period when Casey had the car and was living away from home, so naturally suspicion fell on her. But once again, Cindy stepped in to defend her daughter.
Computer, everyone in the house has access to this computer?
Yes.
And who used the computer at the house?
Everybody.
Cindy tried to explain the search away by saying the family computer was used by everyone, not just Casey. She said that anyone in the house, including guests, could have used it. By saying this, she was trying to create doubt and make it seem like the search could have been done by someone else, maybe not even someone in the family. Later on, Cindy went as far as taking full responsibility for the search.
Do you recall in March of 2008, you doing any types of searches for any items that might include chloroform?
Yes.
And could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why you did that?
Well, I started looking at chlorophyll.
Cindy claimed she was the one who looked it up, but said she'd actually been searching for chlorophyll, not chloroform. But her explanation didn't sit right. If she meant to search for chlorophyll, the stuff in plants, why would the result come back as chloroform, a chemical that can knock people out? Because if she said it was about chlorophyll, no one would question why she needed it. But chloroform, that's a very different story and much harder to explain away.
And I was concerned about my smallest Yorkie. We have 2 Yorkie puppies. And the smallest one was having some issues where she was extremely tired all the time. And both of the dogs would eat the bamboo leaves out in the back. So I started looking up sources from the backyard that could potentially cause her to be more sleepy than it would affect the larger dog. And I started looking up chlorophyll, and then that prompted me to look up chloroform.
I don't know how that explanation will be justifiable to the court, but that was what was presented. The masses in the media didn't respond well to her explanation.
Claiming it was she, Cindy Anthony, not Tot Mom, that made all of those deadly computer searches. Now this, even though Cindy Anthony's own work records clearly show she was at work miles away at the time these computer searches were made. Today, Cindy Anthony, under oath, tells the jury those computer searches were made by her, and her work records must all be wrong.
It turned out that chloroform wasn't the only thing searched on the computer that day. There were also searches for things like hand sanitizers and other suspicious chemicals. All of it happened around the same time, and this was Cindy's explanation for that.
My nurses had sent me an email knowing that, Caylee was of age that she could be affected if we used hand sanitizer, and she got her hands on it. And that scare came out in March. And during the same frame that I was looking up the issues about the dogs, I was looking up ingredients in the hand sanitizer, the alcohol, and then that prompted me to look up other things that we had in the house, like acetone, hydrogen peroxide.
Anyone watching Cindy closely could see it. Her body language, her tone, the way she answered questions. She wasn't there to help find the truth. She was there to protect her daughter. At this point, it wasn't really about accountability anymore. It was all about a mother's instinct to shield her child no matter what. She was doing everything she could to keep Casey from being crushed by the criminal justice system, even if that meant bending the truth or shifting the story. It was less about justice for Caylee and more about saving Casey from the consequences. During the trial, Casey was in jail and didn't have her freedom. Occasionally, her mother and father would call her, and most of the time they discussed the case.
Hey, Mom.
Hey, sweetie.
Oh, I just saw your nice little cameo on TV.
Which one?
What do you mean, which one?
Which one? I did 4 different ones, and I don't know. I haven't seen them all. I've only seen 1 or 2 so far.
You don't know what my involvement is and stuff?
During this call, Casey was upset that her mother had said on TV that she didn't know about her involvement in the case, and that bothered Casey.
Casey.
Mom.
What?
No.
I don't know what your involvement is, sweetheart. You're not telling me where she's at.
Because I don't f***ing know where she's at. Are you kidding me?
Casey, don't waste your call to scream and holler at me.
Waste my call sitting in, the jail?
Whose fault is
bunks are?
Whose fault is you sitting in the jail? You're blaming me that you're sitting in the jail?
Not
Blame
my
yourself
fault.
for telling lies. You mean it's not your fault? What do you mean it's not your fault, sweetheart? If you'd have told them the truth and not lied about everything, they wouldn't...
Do me a favor, just tell me what Tony's number is. I don't want to talk to you right now. Forget it.
I don't have his number.
We'll get it from Lee because I know Lee's at the house. I saw Mallory's car was out front.
You can see why Cindy remained supportive of her daughter throughout the case. Apart from the mother's instinct to protect, Casey herself wouldn't want to talk to her unless she supported her or said things that made her look good.
Oh, by the way, I don't want any of you coming up here when I have my first hearing for bond and everything else. Like, don't even waste your time coming up here.
You know, you're making it real tough for anybody to want to try to, even if it's you with giving you somebody's phone number. You're not even letting me finish. Like, I really... You're asking me for Tony's phone number so you can call him, and then you immediately want to start pressing towards me and saying, don't even worry about coming up here for all this stuff and trying to cut us out.
I'm not trying to cut anybody out.
I'm not going around and around with you. You know, that's pretty pointless. I'm not going to put everybody else through the same stuff that you've been putting the police and everybody else through for the last 24 hours and the stuff you've been putting Mom through for the last 4 or 5 weeks. I'm done with that. So you can tell me what's going on. Christina would love to talk to you because she thinks that you will tell her what's going on. Frankly, we're going to find out. Whatever's going on, it's going to be found out. So why not do it now?
There's nothing to find out. There's absolutely nothing to find out, not even what I told the detective.
Just from listening to that call, you could hear how soft Cindy was with Casey. She was gentle, trying to keep the peace. But Casey was aggressive, rude, and even used the F word with her mother. She didn't hold back with her dad either, snapping at him the same way. George was the one who tried to respond with some firmness. You could even hear Cindy trying to stop him from confronting Casey too strongly, like she didn't want to upset her further. But George's confrontation with Casey here and in other situations would later come back to bite him. During the trial, Casey painted her father as the villain in her story and pushed a lot of the blame onto him. Even when her friend Christina took the phone from her father, Casey remained aggressive.
Anybody else? Hello? Hi, I'm glad everybody's at my house. I'll have to call you later. I'll have to call somebody to get your number. Do me a favor, get my brother back because I need Tony's number.
Okay, is there anything I can do for you?
I'm sitting in jail. There's nothing anybody can do right now.
Well, I'm just trying to be...
Oh, I know you are, honey. I absolutely know that you are, and I appreciate everything that you're trying to do, but I'd like to call Tony. He's not at my house, is he?
No,
Okay.
no, it's just me and your parents and Lee.
Okay, well, can you do me a favor and get my brother back or get the number from him, please?
Does Tony have anything to do with Caylee?
No, nothing.
Okay, so why do you want to talk to Tony? You don't want to, you probably don't want to tell me, do you?
Huh?
You probably don't want to tell me, do you?
What do you, well, I didn't hear what you said.
I said, does Tony have anything to do with Caylee?
No, Tony had nothing to do with Caylee.
Oh, so why do you want to talk to him? You probably don't want to tell me.
He's my boyfriend, and I want to actually try to sit and talk to him because I didn't get a chance to talk to him earlier because I got arrested on whim today.
It sounded like Casey was trying to get a message through to Tony, maybe hoping he'd say something, or maybe just trying to make a point to her parents. She made it clear she didn't want anything to do with them, almost like she was trying to hurt them on purpose. But one thing was obvious. She knew the calls were being recorded. That's probably why she avoided saying anything that could get her into trouble, even if she ended up talking to her boyfriend. When her brother Lee joined the call, she even admitted that she was being careful with her words because she knew the call wasn't private.
I'm not trying to cut anybody out.
I'm not going around and around with you. That's pretty pointless. I'm not going to go through, not going to put everybody else through the same stuff that you've been putting the police and everybody else through for the last 24 hours and the stuff you've been putting Mom through for the last 4 or 5 weeks. I'm done with that.
She was calm with her brother and willing to discuss the case with him, unlike her reaction to her parents earlier on. The truth that everyone knew yet kept pretending not to know came out eventually. A man named Roy Kronk found little Caylee's body and reported it to the authorities.
I'm a meter reader with Orange County, and I had the route today that included the Anthony's home. Okay, and I went down to the school and came back, and when I was coming back, I stopped between the 2 swamp areas there. If you're heading back out towards the main road on the left-hand side, in an area, I noticed something that looked white, and there was like a gray bag down in there. I don't know what it is. I'm not telling you it's Caylee or anything of that nature.
Roy Kronk was a former meter reader who stumbled upon the remains of the baby near the Anthony property, which cast even more suspicion on Casey and her family regarding the demise of the poor little girl. Before the matter was taken to court, George and Cindy visited the prison to break the news to Casey, and this is how she reacted.
Well, someone just said that Caylee was dead this morning, that she drowned in the pool. That's the newest story out there. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise? Surprise? Why say such a thing when you're told your daughter is no more? Does that mean she wasn't shaken or shocked by the news? And then she went on a rant about how her life had been destroyed.
Easy. Hold on, sweetheart. Settle down, baby.
Nobody's letting me speak. You want me to talk? Then
all right,
I'll listen 3 seconds to see something.
Sweetheart.
I'm not in control over any of this because I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what's going on. My entire life has been taken from me. Everything has been taken from me. You don't understand. Everybody wants me to have answers. I don't have any answers because I don't know what's going on. I have no one to talk to except Jose when he comes. It's the only person that I can talk to right now because I can't even say anything to you guys besides telling you that I love you.
Instead of taking a hard look at herself and accepting responsibility, Casey kept pointing fingers. But the truth was most of the fault fell on her. She was the one who lost track of her daughter. She was the one who waited over a month without reporting Caylee missing. She was the one who lied to the police from the very beginning and for no real reason. At every turn, she had the chance to tell the truth, to help the investigation, to show even a bit of remorse. But she didn't. And that's what made people so frustrated, because the one person who should have been fighting the hardest for Caylee was instead making it harder to find out what happened.
I want Caylee. Things like that, and that's not even getting put on the air, which it should be. It's everything else, everything that I'm not saying. That's why I haven't been calling. That's why I haven't been taking calls, because him and I said that we weren't going to do that, because I'm trying to make sure that I'm not going to give anybody anything else to throw against me. Even with me giving them nothing, they're still doing it, so...
Well, Everything's going to go away with you. You'll be fine once Caylee's found.
Mom, I understand that. Do you understand my position on this? You guys expect me to have 1,000 answers, and I have nothing. I've been here a month. Out of contact.
With everything that had happened, you'd expect Casey's main concern to be that her daughter was gone. But that wasn't the case. Most of her frustration seemed to be about herself, how the situation made her feel and how it affected her life. And knowing the jail calls were being recorded, it's possible that there's more of an act to crying. But it's done mostly for herself rather than for Caylee, the real victim. Instead of showing grief for her daughter, she spent most of the time feeling sorry for herself. After all the self-pity and emotional talk, she turned around and blamed her parents, saying they didn't do enough to get her out of jail.
No, they have to honor your wishes when you say something. That's all Dad's trying to tell you. Jose has to honor
And
your
he
wishes.
has been, Mom.
Okay.
He has been with everything. Everything.
Well, you know he's in New York now for a couple days.
He's doing stuff for business for me.
I know.
Well, Mom, you're not telling me anything that I don't know. Please, I don't want to get frustrated or upset with you, but...
Well, in his absence, Dominic's a good person if you want to talk to anybody.
Mom, Thank you. I've already talked to everybody. I know who I'm allowed to talk to, who I'm not allowed to talk to, who I can see, who I can't see, who's going to see me, who's not going to see me. I arranged all of this. It's already been set up. Again, he's the one person that's keeping me in the loop because he's the only person that can. And he's making sure that he's doing that in every way possible.
Well, I just hope he's telling you honestly what you're up against.
Mom, I know what I'm honestly up against. Do you guys understand what I'm honestly up against? And with keeping me here, you're not helping me help myself.
Well, at least
I'm
you're
sorry
safe.
to say that. Huh?
You're safe, honey. We don't have the means to get you out anyway, sweetheart. We don't.
I understand that, but the opportunity was there, and it wasn't taken advantage of, and...
We didn't have an opportunity. I don't know where you're hearing this.
Just give Dad the phone, please. I'm sorry. I don't want to get frustrated. Just give Dad the phone.
It's sad that she doesn't see that her parents have their own trauma and issues they're dealing with regarding the case.
Well, I'm not trying to upset you, neither are Mom. We're not trying to, and if we are, I'm sorry for that.
I know that's not your intention. You have to understand where I'm coming from in this, and obviously none of you are. By still expecting me a month, literally out of the loop, to have some sort of new insight on stuff? I mean, really?
Okay, I realize this is really hard for you to talk about, especially...
Because I can't do anything. Because I've done everything. I've said everything. I've thought about everything. That's all I can do is sit and think. Every day. And that's what I've done. Any information that I've given has been passed on. I know that.
Okay. You know, it's just hard. I know for you it's hard for us because none of us have ever been through any of this kind of stuff before. None of us, you know.
Well, obviously not. And we need to stick together in this, and it's hard for us to at this point.
Casey's manipulation of her parents paid off after she was momentarily released on bail, and the public outrage was more than anyone could handle.
Florida bondsman Albert Estes signed the papers at the Orange County, Florida jail Wednesday to post a $500,000 bond for Caylee Anthony. She's the mother of 3-year-old Caylee Anthony, the toddler missing for more than 2 months. Officials say the young mother could be released from jail as early as Thursday morning. She's accused.
While everything was unfolding, the pressure from the media, the public, and even from Casey, George, her father, was falling apart. He checked into a hotel, trying to escape the noise and stress. But the silence didn't help. He started drinking heavily, mixing alcohol with pills, and sinking deeper into his pain. At some point, the thought of ending it all crossed his mind. Some might have brushed it off as just a breakdown, but the long suicide note he left behind made it clear he had given up. Thankfully, someone noticed something was wrong. There was commotion coming from his room, and they called the police. By the time the officers got there, George was in bad shape, but he survived. This happened in January of 2009, a month after the body of Caylee was found.
You learned in December of 2008 that the remains of your granddaughter were found. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What effect did that have on you when you learned that Caylee's remains had been found?
A deep hurt inside, tears, the whole gamut of just an emotional loss, a breakdown inside of me, and seeing what my wife and my son went through.
Up to that moment, had you held out the hope that Caylee would be found alive?
Absolutely. Every day from July 15th until the day we were told it was Caylee.
In January of 2009, you went, I'll give you a moment. Need a break, Stan?
No, sir, I need to get through this.
Just look at the straight face of the mother of the child. It was too much for George to handle, even in court. But later on, we'll see how things unfold for George, as this is just the beginning of his misfortune.
January 22nd of 2009, Mr. Anthony, you went and got a gun, didn't you?
Jackson.
My understanding of the events of this date are that Mr. Anthony went and got a gun, that he did so with the purpose, I believe he will testify, he did so with the purpose of forcing people who he believed might know something about who killed Caylee, specifically friends or boyfriends of the defendant, with the intention of forcing them to reveal what they knew and then taking his own life. It is revealed in the suicide note, and I believe he will testify that that's what happened. The defense has brought up the suicide. I do, so the court knows, intend for him to identify his suicide note, and in my case, I do intend to offer it because it shows that on January 22nd of 2009, this man had no idea who killed Caylee Marie.
This was when things started to go wrong. For George, the suicide attempt was a painful emotional breakdown, a sign that the weight of everything was just too much. But for the legal team building a case against Casey, it became something else entirely. They saw it as a turning point, a way to tighten the focus. George's breakdown helped them narrow down the list of people who had close daily contact with Caylee before she disappeared. And the fewer names on that list, the stronger the case against Casey became. To the prosecution, if George was ruled out and no one else was close enough to be involved, then all signs pointed back to Casey.
Why, on that particular day, did you decide to take your life?
Why that particular day I picked out, I really don't know. All I know is my emotional state, even through today, is very hard to accept that I don't have a granddaughter anymore. But for that particular day, I don't know, it just felt like the right time to go and be with Caylee.
After the prosecutor was done, Casey's lawyer came forward to ask her father some questions.
You told him that something had happened to Caylee and Casey was lying.
Sir, definitely something happened to Caylee. She's no longer with us. And Casey was the last one that I saw with Caylee. 1 and 1 adds up to 2, sir, in my mind. And no matter how you're trying to spin it, I'm upset because my granddaughter is missing. I don't know where she's at. I was told that someone had taken my granddaughter, forcibly removed her from my daughter, or my daughter dropped her off at some house. I'm trying to put all the stories and information together, sir. Was I running on pure emotion and drive and demanding answers? That is my right as a father and a grandfather, and as whatever you want to spin it. Was I upset and falling apart at the moment? Absolutely. My family was being torn apart. And for you to say that I was doing something wrong, sir, you're wrong.
Do you recall testifying in your deposition that you did not believe that the car was human decomposition.
Casey was clearly upset by what her father was saying. She knew that, unlike her mother, who was easier for her to manipulate, George wasn't just gonna go along with whatever she said and lie for her sake. He wanted answers. He wanted accountability. That's why early in the case he came right out and said he believed Casey was lying about something. And honestly, most people agreed with him. From the very beginning, it was obvious that Casey had a habit of lying. Her father calling her out only made that more real for the public and the courtroom.
Was it decomposition to me? Yes. Was it not my granddaughter or my daughter that I found in the trunk of that car? No, they weren't there. But there is a smell of human decomposition in that car, not the garbage that was in it. I'm stating true facts of what I saw, what I observed, and what I went through that day, and what my feelings were. Neither my granddaughter nor my daughter were in the trunk of that car, and I'm grateful for that, because I don't know if I could have dealt with seeing them back there.
Casey's lawyer began pushing a very heavy claim that George had known about Caylee's death from the very beginning. He pointed to the moment George and Cindy picked up the towed car, saying that George recognized the smell and chose to keep quiet. The defense painted a picture that made it seem like George was part of a cover-up from day one. They even tried to twist his suicide attempt, suggesting it was just a way for him to make himself look innocent while shifting all the blame onto Casey. Whatever mistakes George may have made, the idea that he would intentionally hurt his granddaughter or frame his own daughter was too far-fetched.
To me, sir, that's what it smelled like to me. And my knowledge of law enforcement and what I saw for 10 years of law enforcement gives me that opportunity to know what that is. I can close my eyes at the moment, sir, and I can smell that again. How dare you, sir, try to tell me that I did something differently than what I did?
And that is why you called 911 right then and there, right?
No, sir, I did not call 911.
That's why you drove that car home.
Sir.
Argumentative, ask and answer.
You are arguing with me, sir. I'm trying to be calm.
Rephrase your question, Mr. Bass.
And then you went to work, sir, did you not?
After all that, Casey's lawyer went after George's character next. He brought up what George and Cindy did after Casey was arrested, specifically how they accepted money from a news organization in exchange for an interview. The lawyer used this as a way to question George's intentions, suggesting that if he really cared about his daughter, he wouldn't have taken money to talk about the case. He tried to use it as proof that George was more focused on publicity than helping his daughter through the situation.
All of these media appearances stopped when the allegations of abuse came up, correct?
But get this, before the court session, Casey's legal team had made allegations of abuse against George toward his daughter in an attempt to shift the focus from what she might have done to what he might have done, and how that could have affected her mentally, shaping who she is today. And this is what he said about it.
And a question, yes, sir, and I never would do anything like that to my daughter.
Okay. You know, of course, that with a child under the age of 12 years old is life in prison, don't you, sir?
Relevance.
Sustain.
You're aware of the possible penalties of child molesting, don't you, sir?
Objection. Relevance.
Sustain.
You, of course, would never admit to molesting your child, would you, sir?
Objection. Argumentative.
Overruled. He can answer the question if he can.
Sir, I never would do anything like that to my daughter.
My question is, you would never admit to it, would you, sir?
Sir, I would never do anything to harm my daughter in that way.
Only in that way.
It's hard to even imagine what George was going through during that time. Having your daughter accuse you of horrible things just to save herself from facing the consequences. It must have been unbearable. After everything he had already been through, now he had to sit in court and see how Casey threw him under the bus. And her defense team actually expected people to believe her. But how could they? This was Casey, the same person who had lied again and again, even about the smallest things, just to protect herself. She had built a reputation for twisting the truth. On another occasion, like many others, George's character was being attacked by Caylee's defense team. This time, it was about an alleged affair he had with a so-called mistress.
Do you know a woman by the name of Crystal Holloway?
I know her by that name and also another name.
Okay. What other name do you know her by?
River Cruz.
Okay. And how do you know her?
She came to our command center up on Goldenrod, and where the skating rink is at, in October of 2008.
And how well do you know her?
Just someone who volunteered at our sites, sometime maybe considered her a friend or someone who was going to be helping find our granddaughter.
At this point, they were just looking for dirt on George. Probably even hired a private investigator to dig up anything they could use against him in court. Anything at all.
Did you have a romantic relationship with her?
No, sir. No. To me, that's very funny.
Very funny.
Yes, sir.
And were you ever intimate with her?
No, sir. It also was also very funny. We had a conversation because she had relayed to me probably weeks or maybe just a few days prior to me going there for the very first time that she has a brain tumor. She was dying. She needed someone to comfort her, and I felt as being a good guy or as someone who had come to know a lot of the people inside for volunteering for us, I became very connected with a lot of them, and she was one of them. And I felt because she was giving of herself to me and my family to help it with my granddaughter, that's the least I could do. My wife had knowledge that I was at her residence. I had nothing to hide, sir. Never had.
You're probably wondering what the point of all this was. Why bring up George's personal life in the middle of a murder trial? Well, the defense had a plan. If they could prove that he was having an affair, especially with someone involved in the search for Caylee, they could use that to damage his image. They wanted to paint him as irresponsible, as someone who wasn't grieving the right way. While his granddaughter was gone and his daughter was sitting in jail, he was out having fun and cheating on his wife.
Did you, prior to finding your granddaughter, tell Crystal Holloway or River Cruz that Caylee's death was an accident that snowballed out of control?
Well, sir, to clarify your question, I never found my granddaughter. To this day, I've never found her. And to say that I had said something to her about, it's been stated, or even by you here, that something might have snowballed out of control, that conversation was never there. I never confided in any volunteers or any people I considered those friends that came into our family to help us out. Never confided in anything like that. I wouldn't do that. I was handling everything on my own and with my wife and with my son. That was a private matter for us.
After the affair angle didn't work, they tried another approach, hoping to catch him in a lie or get him to say something he shouldn't, just so they could use it against him. It's almost ironic, isn't it? The lawyer who is supposed to be saving Casey, her defense attorney, was the one going after her father the hardest. And the lawyer trying to put Casey away for life? He was the one standing up for George, defending his name and character. What a strange and heartbreaking position to be in as a person, and even more so as a father. George was caught in the middle of a nightmare.
Did you ever send her a text message telling her that you needed her in your life?
Well, I've seen that information come out. Yes, I sent many text messages to many, many volunteers and people that are helping out. And yes, I did need those people in my life. Yes.
So you sent her that text message?
Yes, sir. I'm not going to say that I didn't. Sir, I never had a romantic affair with Crystal Holloway, River Cruz, or whatever name she wanted to give you or the world. If I'm not mistaken, sir, she has a questionable past. Okay? And if I can clarify that with you, she also has been arrested for fraud,
Judge, I want to move
breaking and entering, and stuff like that. She is not a very good person.
The claim about George's affair was mostly based on the text message, which the defense used to suggest that something was going on between him and the woman. But she was someone they couldn't fully trust. In George's words, he implied she was the kind of person who might say anything if the price was right.
You're going to hear all kinds of bizarre family behavior that just doesn't make sense. How parents should stand by their child, but instead are throwing them under the bus, making bizarre statements and accusations. And that's what this case is going to be about. You're going to hear all kinds of interesting behavior from all parties, not just Casey. And once you see some of this behavior, you'll realize that the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree.
So what he's trying to say is that everything Casey has done is solely, or at least mostly, because of her parents, and that they should be the ones to blame for it.
We are what we are because of who brought us into this world and how we were raised. Casey was raised to lie. This child, who at 8 years old, learned to lie immediately. She could be 13 years old, have her father's penis in her mouth, and then go to school and play with the other kids as if nothing ever happened.
What? What's going on here? This is just too much to take in. How is her father even able to stomach all the things being said about him?
Nothing's wrong. That will help you understand why no one knew that her child was dead. That's the most important thing you must keep in the back of your mind, is that sex abuse does things to us. It changes you. Some people are fortunate to live with it. Others are not. And in this sad tragedy, it had to happen to Casey.
To be honest with you, this is just good acting. I truly don't believe anything the lawyer is saying actually happened to Casey. And watching her cry and create this emotional atmosphere makes the whole thing even more annoying. Then the lawyer went on to narrate what he believed had happened to Caylee. And just as you might have suspected, her father was the one he chose to blame. Isn't that convenient? The same man who raised Casey and who had just been accused of abuse is suddenly the one responsible for Caylee's death in their version of events. This is expected to help deflect the attention of the court and the jury away from Casey and onto her father. The confusion and sympathy alone would be enough to give Casey's team a strategic boost.
She immediately grabbed Caylee and began to cry and cry and cry. And shortly thereafter, George began to yell at her. "Look what you've done! Your mother will never forgive you, and you will go to jail for child neglect for the rest of your freaking life." She cried and cried and asked for her father's help. And it was shortly thereafter that George did help. It's at this moment that Casey should have been stronger. Casey should have called 911. Casey should have done the right thing. And that's what she's guilty of. She's not guilty of murder. This is not a murder case. This is not a manslaughter case. This is a sad, tragic accident.
Just think about it. Even though the defense claimed Caylee's death was an accident, the way they told the story still made George look like the villain. Even if you believed their version, that Caylee drowned in the pool, how does that become George's fault? How does that make him the bad guy in all of this? They used her father to make their story sound stronger and more believable to the jury. To push that even further, they brought the woman who was supposedly George's mistress to the stand.
I met him at a tent when his granddaughter was missing.
When?
I believe it was August maybe.
August of what year?
08, yeah.
2008?
Correct.
Did you develop a relationship with Mr. Anthony?
Yes, sir, I did.
And was this an intimate relationship?
Yes.
Did there ever come an occasion where you had a heart-to-heart conversation with George Anthony as to what happened to his granddaughter?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you were doing and how that all transpired.
The particular night that you're referring to?
Yes.
He was sitting on my couch, and I was sitting on the floor, and he had told me, he had said it was an accident that snowballed out of control, but I was in shock, and by the time I looked up, his eyes were filled with tears, and I didn't elaborate. I didn't ask him anything further.
They used this woman's testimony to back up the whole accidental death story. Her words were meant to support the idea that George knew Caylee had drowned and helped cover it up. But honestly, the whole thing doesn't make sense. George was a former detective. He had worked in law enforcement for years. Are we really supposed to believe that someone with his background would handle things so carelessly that he'd leave traces of Caylee's remains in the car Casey used on that day? That he'd leave her body in a spot not far from their home? And why would he confide in a complete stranger about what happened after just knowing her for a few weeks? That just doesn't line up with how a trained detective would act. And of course, the prosecutors came to his defense.
You chose the National Enquirer, which pays for interviews.
Yes, sir, but he had given me the chance to explain everything in detail, unlike the news media that edit things.
And the story is much, much better if you're actually having an affair with George, right? It's much more sensational.
I did have an affair with George.
But you would agree that the story is much if you're actually having an affair with George than if you're just a friend.
That's not true. He just said that I really believe that it was an accident and it went wrong and she tried to cover it up.
Is that in fact what he said?
Yes, but he also said that it
Ma'am, there's no question before you.
She kept saying George said this and George said that, all without any solid proof, like a recording or concrete evidence. So how can we be sure she's telling the truth?
He didn't tell you that he was present when this occurred, did he?
When what occurred?
When this accident occurred.
No.
In fact, he never told you that he knew it himself, that he knew that to be the case.
I just told you that's what he said. I never elaborated to anything else. I never said that he said anything else other than what he said.
Other than he believed it was an accident that snowballed out of control and she tried to cover it up. That's all he said.
That's not what he said. He said it was an accident that snowballed out of control. I never went to anybody. They came to my door 2 years later.
This just says a lot. And honestly, it makes you wonder if Casey's legal team might have persuaded her to run with that story. Because when officers initially came to her when the story broke, she claimed that she and George didn't have an affair. So what changed? It shows just how far Casey and her lawyer were willing to go and try to keep her out of jail. But how can that even be an accident? What about the duct tapes?
You will learn that 3 pieces of overlapping duct tape covered the nose and mouth of Caylee Anthony. You will learn that the duct tape was placed on her prior to decomposition as it held the mandible or the jaw to the head. You will learn that the duct tape was stuck in the hair, indicating that Caylee's killer never intended that it be removed.
And this is where people started asking questions. If Caylee's death was truly an accident like the defense claimed, then what was the duct tape doing on her face? That detail didn't make sense. The tape wasn't just lying nearby, it was found over her mouth and nose, almost like it was meant to silence her. But if she had drowned, as they said, what would be the need for duct tape at all? And on top of that, drowning usually leaves signs of trauma, bruising, water in the lungs, something. But in Caylee's case, there was none.
You will learn that upon autopsy, there was no evidence of any trauma to Caylee's bones. And you will learn that the only evidence indicating the cause of death of Caylee Marie Anthony are the 3 pieces of duct tape covering her nose and mouth.
All of this made one thing very clear. The chances that Caylee was kidnapped were incredibly low. There has to be a motive to do something like that. And the drowning story, that didn't hold up either. The evidence just didn't match. What did make sense was that something terrible happened to that little girl, something done by someone close to her. The signs pointed away from the accident toward intention. The duct tape, the delay in reporting, the lies, it all suggested this wasn't just a tragic mistake. So now the only real question left was the hardest one of all. Who did it? And then there's the whole Zanny the Nanny situation. For the longest time, Casey claimed a man, who was her former coworker, had introduced her to this mysterious babysitter. That man was later brought to the stand to share his side of the story.
You know Caylee Anthony?
I do.
When did you first meet her?
Probably middle school.
Did you stay in touch from middle school up until 2008?
Through passing.
How would you characterize your relationship with Miss Anthony?
More or less acquaintances.
Okay. Weren't very good friends?
Not very good friends.
Did you ever work at Universal Studios?
I did.
When did you work at Universal Studios?
Approximately 2002.
How long did you work there for?
1 year.
Did you ever work there at the same time that Caylee Anthony worked there?
I don't think so.
And just like that, the first big lie fell apart. The man Caylee claimed had introduced her to Zanny the nanny revealed in court that he never did any such thing. In fact, it turned out that he and Caylee had never even worked at Universal Studios at the same time, which means that he never introduced her to Zanny.
You don't recall ever seeing her there?
Never.
Did you ever introduce Caylee Anthony to a woman by the name of Zenaida Gonzalez?
I did not.
Did you ever use Zenaida Gonzalez as a nanny?
No, sir.
Do you have any children?
No, sir.
Have you lived in the Orlando area consistently since 2002?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever lived in Jacksonville?
No, sir.
Have you ever lived in North Carolina?
No, sir.
With both sides throwing shade at each other and bringing witnesses to the stand in the aim of convincing the jury, a final verdict was made.
So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict is to count 7. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. Were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 11, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
And juror number 12, were these your true and correct verdicts? Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Will counsel and the defendant approach the podium? Caylee Marie Anthony, a jury of your peers, having found you not guilty as to the charge contained in count 1 of the indictment, murder in the first degree, at this time I will adjudge you to be not guilty. As to count 2, the crime of aggravated child abuse, a jury of your peers having found you to be not guilty, the court will adjudge you to be not guilty of the crime contained in count 2. As to count 3, aggravated manslaughter of a child, a jury of your peers having found you not guilty, I will adjudge you to be not guilty of that count. As to counts 4, 5, 6, and 7, providing false information to a law enforcement officer, I will adjudge you to be guilty of those counts in order that you be fingerprinted here in open court at this time.
The final verdict led to widespread public outcry. People couldn't believe she was being let go. But the jury didn't see the prosecution present any solid evidence that definitively proved she was responsible for her daughter's death. For more clarity, one of the jurors came forward to explain why they made the decision to let Caylee go.
Stunning verdict. Jennifer Ford is her name. She's 32 years old, training to become a nurse. And she tells us the first vote in that jury room was 10-2 for not guilty on first-degree murder. And tonight she takes us inside those deliberations. Why? Why did you and the other jurors acquit Caylee Anthony of murdering her daughter?
There wasn't enough evidence.
Don't you think her argument is flawed? I mean, just look at everything. The way she acted back then, all the lies she told, always blaming someone else instead of taking accountability. There were those shady internet searches on the laptop, her cold attitude about her daughter being missing, and the nightmares she was having while staying at her boyfriend's place before she got arrested. When you put it all together, it really seems like Caylee knew exactly what happened to Caylee, even if she didn't do it herself.
Wasn't anything strong enough to say exactly. I don't think anyone in America could tell us exactly how she died. If you put even just the 12 jurors in one room with a piece of paper, write down how Caylee died, nobody knows. we'd all be guessing. We have no idea.
The jury, though, didn't focus on all those warning signs. They ignored the patterns and got caught up in the emotional distractions. Instead of looking at the bigger picture, they waited for one perfect piece of proof before they could say she was guilty. When someone's trying to hide something they did, delaying the report is often their way of buying time or covering their tracks. And it's not just a theory, it's well known in the law enforcement circle that the first 48 to 72 hours are the most critical in any missing person or murder case. After that, it gets much harder to solve. So by waiting over 30 days, Caylee made it almost impossible for any concrete proof that this jury is asking for to come out quickly. According to an officer, people usually see something, so that period of time is absolutely vital in order to find the person right away. And during all that waiting time, any chance of getting help from the public starts to fade. People who might have seen something suspicious probably forgot or didn't think much of it anymore. That's the problem with waiting too long. Memories fade, leads disappear, and the trail goes cold. In most missing child or person cases, it's the parent or loved ones, the one closest to the person, who picks up the phone and calls the police right away. But in this case, Caylee, the mother, stayed quiet while lying to Cindy about the situation. If Cindy hadn't stepped in when she did, who knows how much longer Caylee would have stayed silent. So in this case, instead of focusing on all the evidence and setting emotional sentiment aside, the jury said they needed to know exactly how the deed was done to pass the guilty verdict.
So it's cause of death that was a problem?
How can you punish someone for something if you don't know what they did?
The prosecution wasn't able to give you a solid enough picture of how
Do you see that
died.
picture? I have no idea what it, like, they didn't even paint a picture for me to consider.
You think that this might have been an accident, that she might have drowned in the pool? You believe the defense on that?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a lot easier to get to that conclusion. I can walk from here to there and make it happen. With the chloroform, I'm all over the place. I have no idea. I'm in a maze. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know where the end is. I'm not even quite sure where I began with the chloroform. So I can't get from beginning to end, A to B, to see what even happened. I can't make it work.
She was all over the place with her explanation. But one thing is clear, the jury was overwhelmed. They were hit with so much information, from emotional testimonies to technical details, that it probably became too much to sort through, especially the forensic and scientific parts. They can be confusing if you're not trained to understand them. There's a saying people often use in situations like this: if you know you're guilty, get a jury.
When you all went to deliberate this case, were you unanimous from the start, or?
No. Oh, no.
Really?
No, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, I don't know, I don't really want to speak for everyone else, but there were a lot of conflicting ideas, and some people were like, you know, I feel like she did, but there's just not enough to substantiate it. Some people were just like, no, she didn't do it. Like, they have nothing for me to even have any idea what happened. And I did hear someone say, you know, we're from Pinellas County, we didn't have that emotion and that, whatever. That means we have no bias, we're just looking at the facts. And the facts, when you don't have that emotional connection, they don't prove anything. Like, I'm still confused. I have no idea what happened to that child.
There have been people who said you only deliberated 10 or 11 hours, and that shows you weren't serious.
Oh.
That you didn't really look at the evidence. It's a 31-day trial, or whatever it was, 33-day trial. They say you must not have looked at the evidence.
That's speculation, and you know what? Speculation is not fact.
The juror kept repeating the same thing. They couldn't say Caylee was guilty without knowing the exact when, where, how, and why of what happened to Caylee. To them, without those clear answers, there just wasn't enough to convict. Even when it was brought up that Caylee was out partying while her daughter was missing, drinking, dancing, acting like nothing was wrong, the juror dismissed it. She admitted that it was bad behavior, sure, but said bad behavior alone doesn't prove a crime.
What did you make of George Anthony's testimony?
He did not help the state's case.
Why?
Because he was clearly dishonest.
He was dishonest?
Yes.
How?
Well, he was evasive, number one. His story seemed to change depending on, like they said, initially he was on the defense's side, so he would, you know, fight with Mr. Ashton, not give straight answers. But then he switched to the prosecution side, and then now he won't give the defense straight answers. It's all, what do you mean? And can you ask a question again? And I don't, you know, like, clearly you can follow a logical conversation and respond. Like, he acted like he just couldn't understand what was going on. It was clear to me that he was just being difficult. He didn't want to answer questions, and if it didn't help the prosecution's case, he was going to try and just I don't recall.
Even though the juror said she didn't believe that George had molested Caylee, she still didn't seem to look at the situation from a more rational point of view. George had been through a lot. His granddaughter was gone, his daughter was arrested, and he'd even attempted suicide. He was clearly not in the best mental state, and who could blame him? But despite everything, he still tried to be objective. He stayed mostly neutral or towards his daughter throughout the early parts of the case. It was only when Caylee and her defense team accused him of something as serious and painful as child molestation that he finally shifted to the prosecution's side.
Do you believe George Anthony had something to do with what happened to Caylee?
I don't know if he had anything to do with it, but I think he was there. Him and Caylee have something, and the jail videos again, her mom has all the questions, and George sits there and, pats his wife's back, and then he's like, do you have anything else you want to tell me? He's not like, what's going on? He's always like a step back, hands are clean, not too close.
Well, she does have a point, but she expects to see strong emotional reactions like crying or breaking down. But what this juror might not have considered is that George had to be the strong one during those times. While everything was falling apart, someone had to hold it together. If he had completely broken down, who would have been there to support Cindy, who was already struggling? Who would have helped manage things while their daughter was sitting in jail? Not everyone shows grief the same way. You didn't have to act emotional on camera for the jury to see. After her release and when everything died down, Caylee went into hiding and didn't speak publicly again until about 6 years later, when she gave an interview to the Associated Press.
Well, you were also convicted of one thing.
Lying to the cops.
Right.
People lie to the cops every day. Cops lie to people every day. I'm just one of the unfortunate idiots who admitted that they lied.
It's shocking to hear her speak this way, even after all this time. She still talks like lying was just a normal part of the situation. She didn't seem to feel like lying to the police was wrong. Instead, she acted like the only mistake she made was being stupid enough to admit she lied. But if you followed everything up to this point, you already know. Most of the lies Caylee told weren't uncovered because she confessed. They were exposed when investigators checked her story and found proof that completely contradicted her claims.
I see why I was treated the way that I was, even had I been completely truthful with those officers.
What weren't you truthful about?
Still, there's a lot we don't know about what really happened to Caylee, and we might not ever find out, because it doesn't seem like Caylee wants anyone to know the truth.
And I understand it might have been out of panic.
It was things that I didn't know at the time. I'm still not even certain as I stand here today about what happened.
But it makes you wonder, why is Caylee coming out to speak now after all these years and after being acquitted? Well, it seems like her sudden decision to talk has a lot to do with something the former judge on the case, Belvin Perry, said publicly. He came out and shared his personal belief that Caylee might have accidentally harmed Caylee with chloroform, the same substance that was searched on the family computer.
To your understanding, how did she die?
I don't know.
You don't know? Something about drowning, possibly.
Everyone else has their theories. I don't know.
Uh-huh. So your parents had her?
My dad did.
And next thing you know, she's missing, and right? How did it play?
I did what I was told. I don't remember too much of what happened.
I don't really buy the whole "I don't remember what happened" line. It's hard to believe that you could forget something so serious, especially when it involves your child. And it makes you wonder, who's calling the shots? Could it be that Caylee did something to Caylee by mistake, like the judge suggested, and then turned to her father in a panic? Maybe George didn't want to be too involved, but he gave her instructions on what to do, thinking it would all go away quietly. Maybe that's why the cleanup looked so sloppy.
One of the reasons I'm so good at my job is because I'm taking everything that the state tried to use against me, like my Facebook and pictures and all that stuff that they distorted. I now go through and research people's backgrounds and put everything together in a good way.
It's been gathered that Caylee's now working as an investigator with the same lead investigator who once worked on her case. She's helping him out on his work and learning the ropes along the way. It's strange to think about. The same trauma, pressure, and stress she went through during her time in jail are now being used as tools in her new job. But when asked how she felt about the way people view her guilt and what she might have done to her daughter, this is what she had to say.
I don't give a shit about what anybody thinks about me. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I never will. I'm okay with myself. I sleep pretty good at night.
It must be hard, really hard for her to sleep peacefully at night after everything that's happened. Maybe she can rest now years later when the spotlight has faded a bit. But back then, right after she left jail, well, she was still in the middle of the heat, with the world watching and judging. I doubt she was sleeping easily. Even if she didn't show it on the outside, carrying that kind of weight, whether it's guilt, fear, or just the pressure of keeping up the lies, had to take a toll. This sentiment was echoed by her mother, Cindy, when she appeared on the Dr. Phil show and was asked how she felt about Casey having another baby.
Until they find out what's wrong with her. I know Casey always wanted to be a mom. Casey was a good mom, but something happened along the way. And until we find out what triggered that, I don't know if a pregnancy wouldn't trigger another incident.
Cindy genuinely believed that her daughter wasn't completely okay, mentally or psychologically. So the idea of having another child was something she and most of us felt Casey shouldn't even consider.
And
yes,
that you hope to be grandparents again?
Absolutely.
Would you feel comfortable with Casey babysitting that grandchild?
I think
the question was actually meant for George, but before he could say anything, Cindy quickly jumped in and answered, probably to break the tension and avoid the awkwardness of the moment. Her response felt like a way to protect her daughter's feelings, but George's silence said more. His hesitation made it obvious that he didn't trust Casey to babysit Lee's child, or any child for that matter.
If Cindy and Lee have a relationship with Casey, that's great. I don't think I can have that relationship again with my daughter. Maybe somewhere down the road I might change my mind because I do love my daughter. I don't like what she's done to this family. But that's the first time I've ever been asked a question like that, even thought about that. I never really considered that before.
George deflected the question. If it were up to him, I'm sure he wouldn't want Casey around.
Is what happened that she showed poor judgment, but you would let her babysit another one of your grandchildren?
I don't think Casey's evil. I don't think Casey would allow anything to happen, especially to another child. I think Casey has suffered the loss of her daughter and is going to have to live with that the rest of her life.
Just like we saw throughout the trial, Cindy is still, in some ways, trying to support her daughter. No matter how messy things got, she kept supporting, trying to protect Casey. Just imagine if Cindy hadn't claimed that she was the one who searched for chloroform on the family computer. That one statement might have changed the entire course of the trial. Without it, the defense wouldn't have had much ground to stand on for that part of the case. Things could have ended very differently, maybe even with a guilty verdict.
Mr. Bias called me and said that he had something very, very important that he needed to tell me. He told me that Casey wanted me to know something.
During the trial, when Casey and her lawyer, Jose Baez, realized they couldn't convince George to go along with certain questionable strategies to help Casey avoid jail, they slowly pushed him to the side. George wanted the truth, and they knew he wasn't going to play along. So instead, they turned their focus to Cindy, who had always been more emotionally supportive of Casey. Baez arranged a private meeting with Cindy without George present. The reason he gave was that Casey had something important she wanted to share with her mother. But the way it was set up, it felt like a move to get Cindy on board with whatever version of the story they were building, without George there to push back.
So my thought process is that they finally got her checked out. Maybe he had some answers about her seizures. I was the only one that was supposed to come, and Jose came to the office. And then he proceeds to tell me that Casey wanted me to know how Caylee died. And I sank back in my chair. And when he told me that Caylee had drowned in the pool and that Casey had panicked, my immediate reaction was relief for Caylee, because I know she didn't suffer at that point. And then I was hysterically crying, and I couldn't believe that my daughter put us all through this and that she ruined her life.
That closed-door meeting was where they planned the story that Caylee's death was just a tragic accident and that George helped cover it up. That's why he wasn't invited. They needed Cindy alone, someone more likely to believe Casey and go along with whatever it took to protect her. But like we've said before, George was a former homicide detective. Someone with his experience would never handle a cleanup so inconsistent.
Well, see, my whole take is I think that Cindy's emotional state was played, her heart was played for the whole time through Jose and through my daughter and also through my son. I was never that one to believe a lot of the things like the drowning. I still don't believe that. And I kept on telling her even the day that my son and Cindy came back to our house, and when they told me, I said, I don't believe it. Why wait for 3 years and tell us all this stuff? I didn't believe anything. I've never believed anything the defense had told me. I feel that I've been played, she's been played, my son's been played for our emotional connection to this because of it being Casey and because of it being Caylee. And I even told her how I felt. I said, well, why not tell me? Why not invite me to this little meeting? Why not invite me? Well, because how you would react. I said, because I don't believe it.
The lawyer's job was to win the case, and a case that big would have been a major dent to his record if he lost. So he did everything he could to make sure Casey was released.
Yeah, dude, I believe everything they did. They were pointing stuff at me, making me be the one that's going to help get my daughter acquitted of charges against her, of first-degree murder, of aggravated child abuse, or felony murder, whatever it was going to be. Yeah, I was one who was targeted because they had to cause reasonable doubt, and they did. They did their job.
She could be 13 years old, have her father's penis in her mouth, and then go to school and play with the other kids as if nothing ever happened.
The hurt, the anger inside of me even right now, to hear that again, that hurts to think that that could be concocted and that could be an opening statement. And the judge's ruling was we could be in court, we could not have any kind of reaction whatsoever. And to sit there and just look straight ahead or look down for a moment and just hold your composure, that was very hard for me to do.
Casey's lawyer, Bez, was relentless and brutally aggressive in his approach. On that particular day in court, the rules were especially tough for Casey's parents. They couldn't show any emotion, no matter what was said. And yet, even after holding it together under that pressure, some people still criticized them for not crying, for not reacting, for looking too cold.
Did you ever touch your daughter inappropriately?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you ever molest her at any age, in any way, at any time?
No, sir, I did not. Did not. I couldn't do that and would not do that.
Do you believe that?
Absolutely.
So you believe that this defense theory was not truthful?
Absolutely. I know it's not true.
At this point, it was clear to everyone, including her parents, that all the defense did was play on the jury's emotions to the point where they couldn't make a sound judgment for someone in Casey's position.
I know that it didn't happen the way they're talking about happening. How could I have pulled my granddaughter out of a pool, hold her there, give her off to Casey, and then go off to work that day? That makes no sense to me. I'd be the one to call 911, try to resuscitate my granddaughter. Why wouldn't I have done the right thing?
If George had truly found Caylee in the pool like the defense claimed, things would have played out very differently. First of all, George would have known how to handle the situation properly. He wouldn't have left behind a messy scene or covered things up. He would have taken control and done things by the book. And more importantly, he would have known that accidental drownings, while tragic, aren't crimes that land people in prison for life. These kinds of accidents sadly happen, and calling the authorities right away is usually the best and safest option.
Jose's job, and he said from day one that he was going to do everything he could to get Casey off, that she did not deserve to be there. She did not hurt her daughter, and he didn't care whose toes he was going to step on. He didn't care who he was going to hurt along the way. George became his fall guy, and
the truth is, even without the story about George molesting Casey, the defense still might have gotten a not guilty verdict from the jury. The lack of solid physical evidence and the confusion around the timeline were already working in their favor. But that wasn't enough for Casey's lawyer. His goal wasn't just to win in court, it was to reshape the entire story. By making Casey look like a victim of her upbringing, a victim of trauma and dysfunction, he was trying to shift the public's view of her. He wanted people to stop seeing her as the cold-hearted monster the prosecutors described, and instead see her as someone broken by the people who raised her.
Oh my gosh, my daughter's going to walk out of here, and I'm never going to know about Caylee. I felt she needs to have something to be held accountable for. If that meant being in jail, that meant being in jail.
You wanted them to find something against her.
I did. That's being truthful. That's being honest.
So as you sat there in the courtroom, you wanted to hear a guilty to one of those first three.
I did. I didn't want to see my daughter put to death. But I wanted her to be held responsible for my granddaughter. I did, and I still do.
For George, apart from justice from Caylee, he also wanted the truth for himself. A guilty verdict wouldn't just hold Casey accountable, it would help clear his name. He may have hoped that if she ended up spending some time in jail, the weight of it all might finally break through to her. Maybe she'd come out one day, sit across from him, and finally tell him the truth.
Lee and I would find a place for her. Whether or not she would physically move in to our current home, I don't think that's possible, especially with her relationship with George.
Would she be welcome in your home?
Not while I was there, no.
But this is how her family feels about the whole thing. And while we know most of the public hated the fact that she walked free after everything, what about someone who was actually close to her while she was in prison? Maybe their reaction could give us something more revealing, something valuable.
I don't want to forget to ask about it, so I'm going to ask about it first. You said that she told you, Casey told you, that she used to knock Caylee out?
Yes.
How did that come up?
Actually, it didn't just come up like that. It was a period of time when I used to stand up for her because I was going through my own case, and I've gotten the name calls and everything. So when people used to call her out like that and like say, "Where's Caylee? Where's Caylee?" I used to defend her because I really didn't believe anybody should be judged just because of something they did, and I thought she was innocent. So that's how we became friends.
This woman was one of the closest inmates to Casey during her time in jail. They spent nearly 3 years together. And when you're that close for that long, it's hard to believe that no secrets were ever shared. It's very possible that Casey confided in her, told her things she didn't tell anyone else, things that maybe this woman is still holding on to. Some of those secrets are probably the kind she...
I would ask her, like, so, how was your childhood? How did you, grow up? How was Caylee? And at one point she told me that because she was young, she wanted to go out and party, but she didn't want to leave her baby with her mother.
Why?
It was my belief it was a little jealousy going on because the mother was very close to Caylee. So she didn't want to leave Caylee there. It was kind of like a fight for the best one to win with the love of Caylee, and it's really confusing.
The first story Casey told the officers was that after a fight with her mom, she took Caylee and dropped her off at the babysitter's place. So it's possible that the fight itself was about Caylee. Maybe Casey didn't want her to leave with Cindy. Maybe things were already bad between them, and that moment pushed everything past the edge. Some people even speculate that Casey might have said something like, "Cindy and I would rather not have Caylee than for her to have..."
Well, she said that she used to knock the baby out so she can go party. And she would put her to sleep, and then when she'll come back, the baby would still be asleep, and the next day she's awake. So that's how that came up.
This part of the story is really revealing. Casey was jealous of the growing bond between Caylee and Cindy. That jealousy may have pushed her to start keeping Caylee away from her mom, taking her to her boyfriend's place instead, where Casey was spending most of her time back then. She knew that if her daughter started crying and the neighbors heard, someone might call the cops, and that could lead to her losing custody of Caylee, possibly to Cindy. Is it possible that Casey might have overdosed the poor little child to the point of no return, and then tried to cover her tracks so that no one would find out? Could this be why she was so persistent about talking to her boyfriend at the beginning of the trial, because he might have known something? Could this be...
At her home, which is her parents' home as well, so she would tell me it was at home when she would do it, and then she'll go out and then come back home.
And she would be there, and she would break it. Did she say what she used to knock her out?
I can't pronounce it. I can't pronounce it that well. Foam. I can't pronounce it. It's I don't know much about it, but I know it's some type of chemical. It's chloroform.
This might be why Casey searched for chloroform on the family computer. If what Casey told her inmate friend is true, it means Cindy lied in court to protect her daughter. But how did she use it to not...
She said that?
Yeah.
What did she say? Tell me more about that.
I know that how she did it was she would pour it on like a wash rag, and put it over the baby's face so she'll inhale it. and that will what will knock her out.
Do you know where she got it?
No. After that point, I was kind of
okay. She told you that?
Yes.
She told you she would pour it on a wash rag and put it over her face?
To knock her out.
What was your reaction when you heard that?
I was real standoffish because, I mean, I have a little brother and sister, and I would never imagine to do something like that to them, but it was kind of hard because I was still in the belief of people deserve second chances. But even now, still watching the news and being in prison where there's more people that harm children, I'm against it now.
The inmate's name is Maya. When the interviewer asked Maya to give more context about the jealousy Casey had toward the attention Caylee received, she explained that it felt more like a sibling rivalry than mother-daughter bond. Casey had always been the baby of the house, the one who got all the attention. But when Caylee was born, that changed. Suddenly, the spotlight shifted. The love, the praise, the focus, it all went to the new baby. And for someone like Casey who craved attention, she didn't like it. But it was annoying to know that someone is...
So she felt leaving Caylee with her more often, they will get a closer bond. And that's what she didn't want. So that's why she didn't allow them to babysit. I mean, she would leave the baby every now and then because I know she's told me that her parents used to take care of her. But if she didn't have to, she wouldn't.
And this is exactly why Casey created the fictional Zanny, the babysitter. It was her way of making her family, especially Cindy, feel like Caylee was in safe hands whenever she took her away. It gave her the freedom to do whatever she wanted without being questioned. She could be at her boyfriend's place with Caylee and tell her mom that the baby was with the babysitter. Or Caylee could be knocked out, sleeping from something Casey gave her, while Casey went out partying, and everyone would just assume Caylee...
Did she ever tell you about a nanny?
I'm not sure if it's true. I'm really not. When she first came to jail, we were both under PC. And when we first started talking, the first time I asked her, well, what happened? She told me the baby was abducted by her nanny. And the second time, she said that the nanny came home, the babysitter came to her house to babysit. And when she went out, that's when she last saw the baby with the nanny.
At her own house? Yeah.
So I really don't believe it's true. I really don't believe there was ever a babysitter. I think it was just a cover-up for her. But she's mentioned it, but I don't think it's true.
Do you remember what Cindy said on Dr. Phil's show about her daughter needing help before even thinking about having another baby? Maya brought that up too and talked about what...
I know for a fact that she does have mental disorders because when she came in, she was under psychops, which means mental evaluation.
Don't they always do that with everybody, though?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
You are
but then
placed...
she didn't go in a psych ward after that.
No, she didn't. But I'm not sure if they took her off in county jail off of that, but she is in PC because the case is high profile.
Right.
When she was there with me, the reason why we couldn't come out the cell together, we were the same custody, both PC. She was psychops. She had a psychops hold, which was mental health evaluation. The doctor has to come in every other day and ask her questions. She slowly graduates to her privileges like canteen, a blanket, all her uniform, her hygienes. You have to get those privileges.
Okay, but did she ever get out of that to the point where she was...
I'm not sure if they ever took her off completely.
You might wonder why the defense didn't take the mental health route to try to get Casey off the hook. After all, if someone isn't mentally stable, it could be argued that their actions weren't entirely their fault. It's a strategy that's worked in other cases. But if the defense had gone down that road, they would have had to admit that Casey was guilty of something. They would have had to accept that she was involved in Caylee's death in some way, even if her mental state was to blame. And that wasn't the route they wanted. Their goal wasn't just to reduce the sentence, it was to walk her out of that courtroom completely free. But in a Peacock docuseries titled Caylee Anthony, Where the Truth Lies, which premiered on November 29, 2022, Casey painted a different picture, coming forward with even more damning allegations about what she claimed really happened.
I've had this up since 2005, and it's gone with me everywhere I've gone. So she's running around screaming, having the time of her life on my mom's porch, and I asked her to stop so I could get a picture, and she does this. this, makes this face. I was with her when she did this. We broke probably every single one of these crayons. Those moments were happy, innocent. There was no trauma.
This was the warm, calm, and emotional start they gave the documentary, making it seem like what was to come would be something new or revealing.
I lied to law enforcement. I admitted that I lied to law enforcement. So I am a convicted liar. It's the truth.
And what is your relationship to truth and lying today?
I'm a little too honest. I'm blunt. I'm direct. Almost painfully so.
For someone who's known to lie about just everything, it's kind of wild that they thought saying she won't be lying in the documentary would calm people down. This is someone who lied so much, it nearly got her sent to prison for life. And now we're just supposed to believe that suddenly in front of a camera she's telling the truth. Do they really think people are going to fall for that? Come on.
So let's go back to the beginning. July 16, 2008. The day that Caylee's kidnapping is reported. What are you thinking and feeling on that call? There's no emotion.
There's nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's very weird. I was so numb during so much of that. I did meet someone named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. She was babysitter, was the nanny. All of that's true, was not my nanny, was not my babysitter.
Is Casey seriously still holding on to this Zanny the Nanny story? This was published in 2022, more than a decade after she was acquitted. After all the allegations, after all the evidence clearly showed there was no nanny. Even the guy she claimed had introduced her to this so-called babysitter came forward and said he didn't even have a child, let alone a nanny to recommend. Yet here she is, still sticking to the same story. It's hard to believe she expects anyone to take her seriously after all this time. Here is the video just to refresh your memory.
Did you ever introduce Caylee Anthony to a woman by the name of Zenaida Gonzalez?
I did not.
Did you ever use Zenaida Gonzalez as a nanny?
No, sir.
Do you have any children?
No, sir.
There you go. But from this point onward, the allegations and attacks started getting worse and worse.
How'd you sleep?
There's no such thing as good sleep. Not that I know. A lot of nights I have very clear images and flashbacks, nightmares. My nightmare last night, it was similar to other things that happened to me growing up.
What was the nightmare last night?
My father was holding me down. That happens again and again and again.
Even after all these years, Casey still hasn't let her father rest. Of all the fingers she could point, she keeps going back to him. And let's be honest, Peacock probably paid her a good amount of money to sit there and paint such a graphic picture of her own father. A lot of people believed the whole blame George angle was a strategy to win the case. But now she's monetizing it.
When I was 8 years old, my father started to come into my room at night. I was physically hurt. Scared because I was physically hurt and I can't tell mommy what happened.
If you remember the Dr. Phil interview, Cindy didn't seem fully convinced that Casey was okay with her father being thrown under the bus. She actually said that some of Casey's emotional outbursts might have been because of the guilt she felt over what her lawyer had to do to get George to get her out of jail. Cindy seemed to believe that deep down, Casey wasn't comfortable with the idea of using her own father as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Even Cindy was struggling to make sense of how far things went just to win the case, and how much damage it caused within their own family.
And I believe with all my heart that Casey put a stop to him going after her brother. I think that watching Casey during some of what Jose was stating about her father, you could either take it that she was crying because it actually happened to her, or you could take it that she was crying because she had to do this to her dad, or her defense had to do this to her father.
Do you think she regrets it?
Oh, absolutely.
I wonder what Cindy must be thinking after seeing that interview. It's become painfully clear that Casey only cares about herself. As long as she's okay, nothing else seems to matter. Not her father, not her mother, not even the truth. Cindy said that the defense team wanted to go after Lee too, Casey's brother, and that maybe she was the one who stopped them from dragging him into it like they did with George. But what's about to come next will truly shock you.
The one day just stopped, just before my 12th birthday. My brother started coming in shortly after I turned 12. My brother never me, no, absolutely not. But it was close enough where there was a pattern.
At first, there was never any mention of her brother being involved in any of this. His name wasn't part of this scandal. But now it seems like just blaming her father wasn't enough, because saying George was the only one involved started to sound like old news. But adding Lee, that gave this story a new twist, something fresh to make people lean in and listen again.
And this is after going through therapy and trying to explain why I got the tattoo in the first place, especially during that time period. Because that was a subconscious way for me to speak out against all of it.
Against what?
My family, my flawed and f***ed up.
After everything her family did for her and what they went through for her during the case, after all the times her mother stood by her, fought for her, and even helped build her defense, this is how Caylee repays them. Cindy gave her the benefit of the doubt when the whole world was ready to turn away. She defended her, made excuses for her, and even took heat from the public just to protect her daughter. And even though Caylee didn't directly attack her mom the way she did her dad and brother, she still lumped her into the group when she criticized the whole family. To people like Caylee, they're always the victim. Everyone else is to blame. It's never their fault, and no matter what others do to support them, it's never enough.
I remember these pictures like they were yesterday. And that's part of the reason why it's so hard to look back. I miss her every second of every day.
When you see those tears, you can't help but wonder, are they really for the pain of losing her daughter? Or are they just for herself, for the consequences and the chaos that followed? Because with Caylee, it's always been about her feelings, her struggles, her side of the story.
The only person in this world that matters to me still is my daughter. But I'm still defending the fact that I didn't hurt her. I live it every single day. And no one can ever tell me I should just get over the fact that my daughter isn't here and I've been blamed for her being gone.
When I said it was all about her and her feelings, well, now you can see it for yourself. Everything she says is me, I, myself, how I sleep at night. They're blaming me. It's always centered around her. And of all the things she's been inconsistent about, one thing's always stayed the same. Caylee's complete inability to take a hard look at herself and admit she might have done something wrong. Think about it. How many times have you heard her say something like, it was my fault, or I shouldn't have lied, or I should have done things differently? Let's rewind a bit. Still on the documentary, Caylee claimed that the supposed way her daughter died is different from what was presented in court.
Too many scenarios of what could have happened, but her drowning in the pool is not one. It's not possible. In most scenarios, it would be plausible. Not in this one. The ladder wasn't on the pool. It's the only way in or out, for her or for me.
So why let Jose Baez and your defense team make that argument again and again?
My mom was the first one that floated the theory that she could have drowned in the pool, and he went with what my mom said. He had to explain something. Can't just tell the jury she doesn't know.
Now it's suddenly her mother's fault for starting the drowning in the pool narrative. Maybe Caylee will finally share how she really thinks Caylee died.
So what was your thought on why she was wet?
Something I still can't piece together. I wasn't the only one home. I'm not outright accusing him of murder, but it wasn't an accident in the pool.
Isn't that interesting? Caylee's saying she's not accusing her dad of murder, but in the same breath, claiming that Caylee was murdered. So who did it then? You can't have it both ways. Or maybe Caylee's trying to suggest that her father CA'd Caylee, and when he realized his actions had led to her demise, he pretended she had drowned? Because I'm sure her lawyer didn't just make up the story he presented in court. Caylee must have given him the details of what she claimed happened. But now she's saying something entirely different. That's typical Caylee behavior. Say one thing now, then completely contradict herself the next time. Luckily, Megyn Kelly brought Jose Baez, Caylee's lawyer, onto the show to clear some things up. Of course, there are things he wouldn't be able to disclose, but at the very least, he could shed some light on a few things.
The one thing that is certain is that we're never going to really know what happened. And I can say this much. The evidence was extremely weak when you got past the noise. Now, the noise is still there, and that's why people still feel the way they do. But once you got past the noise, there was no evidence for us to really understand what actually happened. And that was the central theme.
You're not wrong about that. You're not wrong about that. That was the prosecution's biggest challenge, was that they couldn't tell the jury exactly how she died. They didn't know. And by the time they found little Caylee's remains, there was no way of proving it. As the remains were too decomposed. You were not able to determine the specific cause of death. And so that was really a problem, because you're right, juries, Americans and juries in particular, they want to know what happened. They want the prosecution to be able to say, she did it and this is how she did it. And they couldn't.
So as you can see, the 31-day wait worked in Caylee's favor in the end. If the body had been in better condition when it was found, an autopsy could have determined how Caylee died, giving the case clearer direction and possibly establishing a motive.
In life, and we like to judge them, especially in the media and in the courtroom. And I think what you have to do when you set up a system of justice is it has to be in line with what actually occurred, so that we don't have the flip side of wrongful convictions, which run abundant in our system.
Fair enough, he did his job well. We have to admit that there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of people in the prison system who were wrongfully convicted. Every now and then we see the headlines, someone released after spending years behind bars for a crime they didn't commit. So yes, it happens. And in a system where the burden of proof is everything, doubt can be enough to set someone free.
Well, there's a lot of criticisms of Miss Anthony's defense and her position. But if you want to say she's guilty, I would flip it on the other side. And I know you along with a lot of folks say, I know she's guilty, but okay, so what did she do? Explain it to me. How does she do it? And
I don't need to know the cause of death. I'm just saying, juries may. I don't need to know exactly how she did it. I just know she did it.
I agree. You don't need to know. But so then, how much stock can we put in that? And that's the whole thing.
There's a dead baby. It's not like we never found the body. We found a dead baby with duct tape on her mouth and thrown away like trash in a garbage bag in a wooded area 14 houses away from Caylee Anthony's.
Megyn, like so many others, is looking at this from the outside. And like most people, she sees what's obvious. Caylee was responsible in some way for what happened to Caylee. Whether she was actively involved or just passively let it happen, we may never know for sure. But what people do know is that Caylee is gone, and Caylee's actions made it nearly impossible to believe she was innocent. That's why so many wanted her to pay, whether or not the justice system had the kind of hard proof it usually needs. For a lot of people, it wasn't about legal technicalities, it was about accountability. And in their eyes, she walked away without it. What would have happened if this were the case of a serial killer or some dangerous individual? Would someone like that be allowed to walk free and roam the streets again?
Every single word I said in that opening statement, as in with every opening statement that I give in my career, it is based on a good faith basis, based on a lot of what I know that goes around in the background of the evidence. And believe me when I tell you, there were numerous facts that came out in that case in evidence that no one ever talks about and no one ever wants to discuss. And I'll just leave it at that.
What do you mean? But finish your sentence. That what? That bolster the drowning theory?
Again, you have to read the transcripts or look at the actual trial. There's tons of stuff in there, and I'd rather not rehash it.
I'm just asking you, what point are you making, though? Like, I'm not going to go back and look at every... What are you trying to say? If I were to go there, what point would it prove? That she drowned? Or, like, what are you saying is bolstered by a review of the transcripts?
Well, there was evidence testified to by our forensic experts as to the potential drowning theory. There was, in addition to that, there was cross-examination that the jury can make their interpretations based on. They're free to believe a witness or not believe a witness based on those questions. And I can tell you this, a lot of the feedback that we got from the jury is they believe certain parts of the evidence. There were statements made at numerous points throughout the trial that raised serious concern about the drowning in the pool. And when I say concern, I mean raise the issue that was certainly a potential aspect. And it's the prosecutor's job to exclude that reasonable hypothesis of innocence.
That's true.
So, they knew about the drowning.
One thing that stood out to me in what Jose Bez said during the show was his response to a key question about the trial. He was asked what he had to say about Casey, now claiming that Caylee didn't drown in the pool, after using that exact narrative to get herself out of prison. And this is how he responded.
My former client's statements. I have nothing to say about that. That's not a case that I'm currently handling, so I'm not going to comment on that. But I can tell you this. If I had a nickel for every lie that was spoken in that case, I'd have been able to retire right after. And
For sure.
I'm not referring to the lies that have to do with Miss Anthony. There were lies throughout that case from multiple witnesses and multiple people on the side who had knowledge and information but chose to say other things. So having said that, that's really not foreign when it comes to criminal cases, because people have their specific agendas and interests. So you have to look at a case in its entirety and the entire complexity of the case. So
Hayes is basically saying that Casey, just like many others involved in the case, lied profusely about plenty of details, and I'm sure Cindy would be at the top of his list of liars. Another important point addressed in this interview is something Jose Bez wrote in his book. He claimed that one of the searches found on the family laptop was for foolproof suffocation. Bez suggested that George might have been planning to take his own life using that method out of guilt over what he allegedly did to Caylee. However, Casey contradicted this in her Peacock documentary. Plus, another investigation revealed that it was actually Casey who was home that day all day, not George. Jose Bez was asked what he thought about it.
You're asking me about something that occurred 11 years ago, specific pieces of evidence that occurred 11 years ago.
Well, I saw you issued a response to Marsha
Let me finish
Clark.
my answer if I can.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you recently commented on this.
Well, no, I didn't. Let me clarify what I'm willing to comment and as far as I'm willing to go. I'm aware of what reporters had in their possession. I had the only mirror-screened copy of the hard drive along with law enforcement. Law enforcement never made that claim. Neither did I. I was certain, based on the evidence that I had from my experts, not a blogger, which the media used. Both Tony Pipitone, who was the reporter, and Marsha Clark utilized the same person who dabbled in computers, wasn't a real forensic expert, but yet it's being tainted, it's being painted out in the world as if it had some real credibility. I lived this case 11 years ago, and I can tell you we did an incredibly thorough job. We did, in fact, just as thorough a job as law enforcement did, if not better. And I had that evidence ready to go and ready because I believed it favored Casey. And that is George had done the search. Let me finish. That is just one of many things that we had in our possession that we were willing and able to use should we have decided to use it. But you got to understand, and when you defend a criminal case, you don't have to prove anything. It's the other way around. It's not really an adversarial system the way it's painted out. So given that, I didn't feel I needed to.
He's very passionate about his work, and he'll do all he can to defend his ideas and everything he's worked for. Not even contradictory statements from Casey will make him budge. Speaking of Casey's statements, the most recent and perhaps most bizarre development was the creation of her first TikTok account. Her first post went up on March 1st, 2025, and it included a link to her Substack page along with a post from the page. She retweeted a post about how the internet makes people hate others they don't even know, more or less suggesting that people don't really know her and are just hating blindly. Maybe she's hoping to use her new Substack page to show the world who she really is, but not for free. You have to subscribe to find out. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already gone over there and paid just to see what she has to say. On that same first post, she added a second screenshot explaining how she plans to engage with her audience on social media and inform new followers about the subscription model for her pages. And if you noticed, she turned off the comments section on her TikTok page, because we all know it would have become a playground for trolls to have fun and tear Caylee apart. One line really stood out to me. She called herself an advocate and a researcher. And I had to stop and ask, advocate for what? Or for whom? Because if anything, she needs advocacy. After everything that's happened, after years of building up a reputation that most people wouldn't want tied to their name, it's strange to see her take on that title so casually. If she's advocating for anything, it seems more like her own image than any real cause. On that same day, March 1st, 2025, she posted her first and so far only dialogue-style video on TikTok, where she spoke directly to her followers.
First of probably many recordings on a series that I'm starting. I am a legal advocate. I am a researcher. I've been in the legal field since 2011. And in this capacity, I feel that it's necessary, if I'm going to continue to operate appropriately as a legal advocate, that I start to advocate for myself and also advocate for my daughter. For those of you who don't know.
Just like I thought, advocating for herself sounds way more believable. That would at least make some sense. But to say she's advocating for her daughter? Come on, let that girl rest. The worst has already happened. Then she went on to clarify that it's not going to be about her family, which is ironic, considering her entire story has been built based on them.
It's not in response to anything that they have said or done. That's not to say that I'm not going to respond at some point to some of the things that they have said and done. The whole point of this is for me to begin to reintroduce myself. I'm doing this both personally for me, but in a professional capacity. Moving forward, the majority of what you will see will be me speaking in a professional capacity. My goal is to continue to help give a voice to people, to give people tools and resources that they can utilize so they actually know where they can turn to.
This is honestly kind of funny. Sure, I get it, she's jumped into the legal world right after she was acquitted, and whatever her reason for doing that, that's her business. But with her history, is she really the one who should be coming out now claiming to be a voice for the people? Like what kind of people she's talking about? Because if it's about standing up for victims or the wrongly accused, she might not be the best example. She's trying to wear a label that doesn't quite fit.
If you have questions, I will set up an email address where we can correspond directly. Up until this point, that has never happened. And it's only going to be on a limited basis regarding legal issues, legal matters. One of the main reasons that I'm doing this, there are people close to me who have been targeted and attacked recently. There are also people close to me who have had some recent things occur. And when necessary, people needed to step up, myself included. So as a proponent for the LGBTQ community, for our legal community, women's rights, I feel that it's important that I use this platform that was thrust upon me and now look at as a blessing as opposed to the curse that it has been since 2008.
She said, join me on Substack, like it's just a free space where anyone can reach her. Booking an actual appointment with her, whether it's virtual or in person, is definitely going to cost money. And honestly, that part's fine. People's time is valuable. What I do have a problem with is her trying to position herself as some kind of hero, talking about people around her being attacked, and now she's stepping in to save them. She even name drops the LGBTQ+ community and women's rights like she's their new voice. These are the same communities someone like her would assume would have a soft spot for her when, in reality, they're more likely to see straight through the act.
I will explain in great detail why it's so important for people to protect their privacy. It's not just important to public figures, it's even more important to private individuals. And with the current climate in our country especially, it's that much more important, which is why I am utilizing the Substack platform. Yes, I am advertising this and publishing this on TikTok, possibly also through other meta platforms, but my intention is to separate from that and showcase even more why Substack is such an important resource for people to utilize moving forward.
I honestly don't know why she thinks Substack is the perfect tool for this heroic mission she claims to be on. Maybe some of you can help me out in the comments, because from where I'm standing, the reason feels pretty clear. TikTok? Sure, it's got the audience, but not the money. Meta platforms like Facebook and Instagram? Great for attention, but there's no built-in way to get people to pay for content. So Substack, that's the golden ticket, because this advocacy and our fight for women's rights and the gay community suddenly makes the most sense when it's tied to paid subscriptions. In Caylee's latest and last TikTok post on April 4th, 2025, she addresses a concerning issue she felt was important to her followers to be aware of. She said, "I'm going to address something because this has continued to come to my attention in the last couple of days. I have not threatened to sue anyone, nor do I have any plan to do so. I've not offered anyone money, nor have I been in touch with anyone to any degree regarding any of the rumors or bullshit that's being spread. There are people scamming individuals on the internet, making false claims, and trying to provoke something that is simply not going to happen. I would caution you against believing rumors on the internet, no matter how many followers someone has. It's clickbait, and it's intentionally inflammatory. This goes for anyone else listening or watching, or attempting to invoke a response of any kind. You don't have to believe in what I'm doing. You don't have to participate at all. But do not continue to fall into the trap of misinformation and otherwise on the internet. You continue to become part of the problem as opposed to part of the solution. The solution is to educate people, to bring together a community of people trying to help one another, not to stir up fear or otherwise. This is exactly why I stepped forward in the first place, because we have political heads of state doing the same thing every single day. People are living in fear because of it." I think this post came mostly as a reaction to all the noise and backlash that started after she joined TikTok and began talking about wanting to help people. She probably didn't expect that even after all these years, so many people would still be angry about what happened. That must be tough for her. Maybe she is trying to redeem herself. Maybe that's why she's now showing up on these platforms to connect with people differently. And sure, the paid part of Substack feels a bit suspicious, but it could also just be her way of filtering out the hate and focusing on people who genuinely want her help. Plus, seeing how she's handled the recent situation in a bar where she got into an argument with another woman but stayed mostly calm, maybe there's a bit of growth happening. Maybe there's still hope for her after all.
She verbally assaulted me, but physically assaulted me with witnesses. I'm still damp from the drink she threw at me.
And why did she throw a drink at you?
We had a verbal altercation outside.
Outside over there?
Yeah.
And elaborate, like what happened?
We dated the same person for a couple years. Whether they're together or not together, she got upset that he had texted me. I let her know that he had, and she came inside and threw a drink at me.
For someone who waited 31 days before her mother had to call the police about her missing daughter, it's kind of surprising to see how quick Caylee's now to call 911 or act when something happens. Some people see that differently and wonder, if she can do that now, why couldn't she do it back then? We'll probably never know the full answer, but one thing is certain. With Caylee Anthony, the drama isn't over. There's always more to unpack, more to say, and more headlines waiting to happen. All we can do is wait and see. Maybe one day people will be able to look past everything she's done and decide for themselves if she really has something good to offer, or if it's just more of the same.